Hey everyone, it's George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovators Mindset podcast. And this episode is inspired by something I saw on TikTok. And it was really kind of interesting because I was thinking about how I'm using TikTok not to think about ideas for podcasts, to be inspired with ideas, but to just check out. And we always talk about the ideas of how we use technology in meaningful ways, but I think there's sometimes where it's okay to use technology to just check out. Like we're always thinking about how we can be so productive, but one of the things I really like doing at the end of the night is just watching a TV show that's not meant to make me think, not meant to push any ideas, but for me just to kind of chill out. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But sometimes you see something in a TV show, and it's funny because this podcast is based on a newsletter, and I was talking about like, why do we even call them TV shows anymore? Like, do we really watch them on TV? I haven't like watched a show on a TV network for years. I watch it on Hulu, HBO Max, whatever. But I was just thinking about I saw this video. And somebody had said that I ended up on the wrong side of TikTok. And then all of a sudden I've seen this comment before several times, and I can't remember the video, but for some reason, this one time that I saw it, it was just kind of sticking in my head. Why did someone say I ended up on the wrong side of TikTok? And many times why people say that is because they ended up on a side of TikTok. They ended up getting to an audience who disagrees with their viewpoint. And if you think that when you share something, it only goes out to the people that agree with you, that might be true. In many cases, we have algorithms that kind of feed us what we want to see and, what we want to share. But if you're sharing an opinion, you're trying to basically make people think differently about something. Wouldn't you want to actually get to the side that don't agree with you to convince them? Because when you're sharing ideas just to people that actually agree with everything that you say, you're not moving the needle in any direction in the way that you want, especially if you believe, hey, this is something I really believe we need to move forward. If you want to move an idea forward, the best way to do it is to actually appeal to the people who do not agree with you, who do not see the value in what you're doing. And I'll give you an example of this. I actually didn't write this in the newsletter, but I've written about it before. Last year I was at a conference, and one of the keynote speakers said something that really made me think. Because I've kind of heard it before, but again, it was just, for whatever reason on this one day, it stuck with me in a totally different way. And what they had said is that we basically need to de-emphasize memorization. And I've heard some stuff like that before. You have all these conversations like, hey, in a world of like Google, ChatGPT, all the social media, people don't need to know basic facts, right? We don't need to know that because we can look up anything that we want. And this is a tech audience, and like people that use technology, and probably very comfortable with this idea. And immediately everyone starts cheering. And I noticed that right away. Like, yeah, we need to de-emphasize memorization. What if you said that same statement at a curriculum conference? If you said that at a leadership conference, would that have got the same warm reception that it was received when it was made that statement at a technology conference? And when I talked about this, when you say things like we need to de-emphasize memorization, does that actually bring the people who disagree with you closer to, or you're doing like, yeah, we do need to de-emphasize memorization? Or does it actually make them hold on to what they really kind of focus on? And I'll give you an example of how I've kind of get people to think differently about this in this context exactly, because I wrote about this specifically. I actually don't think we need to memorize stuff the way that we used to, but I think that having content knowledge is really, really important. I think, we can't memorize everything. It's just impossible. So what I really want to focus on is how do we actually develop a really deep understanding of the material that we have? But you do have to understand the material, right? So if you're focusing on really deep understanding of information, and that you can actually manipulate that information to share a story, to, leverage it in a way that's beneficial, by default, you will have memorized it. But if you only focus on memorization, that doesn't actually mean you understand it. So when you make a statement like that the focus should be on understanding, and by default, you will memorize it, you're actually probably bringing people closer to you that might not agree with the idea of de-emphasizing memorization, because you're not giving them an alternative to actually aspire to see a better path forward. You're just saying, here's what I'm going to take away from you that you actually think is really, really important. And when I saw that comment, like, I ended up on the wrong side of TikTok. Are you just looking for applause? Are you just looking for agreement? Or are you actually looking for helping people move forward in a direction that you think is really, really meaningful? And you can see this quite a bit on social media. People, and I don't know if this is the right term, they'll do like what I call like rage bait. They'll share stuff they know everyone agrees with them. Or I shouldn't say everybody, but a vast majority of people, not because they really believe it, but they know it will get them likes. It will get them attention. And is that what we're trying to do? Or are we actually trying to move people forward? So that I ended up on the wrong side of TikTok. I think it's like, hey, how do you actually really get people that might not agree with you to focus on this stuff? And because I've been comfortable with technology, and I'm not a tech person at all, and my focus for years has been on innovation, over the years, I've been invited to lots of technology conferences to speak, to connect with people. And I really enjoy it, because I think those are opportunities to learn from people in similar disciplines from you. And the idea of iron sharpens iron is something that really, really is meaningful to me. I want to be in those spaces where I can learn from others as well. It's not just about you hearing from me, but me learning from all these incredible people doing really amazing things in their school communities. But the conferences I really appreciate is, for example, I spoke at California MTSS conference, and that is not a typical conference for someone who's also keynoted, technology conferences in the past. And that was something I was really excited about. When I've been able to work at the NAGC, when I keynoted the National Association of Gifted Teachers conference, that was something that was really meaningful to me, because it was going into a space where a lot of the people might not have really thought of technologies being used in a meaningful way. And so to get them to see the value of it, what is really important is you have to understand them. You have to understand what are their needs, what are some of the things that they see as valuable, and build upon that, as opposed to say like, hey, everything that you're doing is wrong. Here's the right way. You're going to lose them. You're probably more people are going to be distanced from technology or not, because those are the people you want to move forward. And I'll give you an example of this. Years ago, there was something called the SAMR model. I think people might still use this, and it is coined by Ruben Pentadura. And I apologize if I'm saying the name incorrectly. And so many people that were really focused on technology would talk about the SAMR model. And it basically follows these, this, and I don't think this is the way Ruben meant to utilize it, was like, hey, we talk about substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. And so if we can get teachers to look at their technology use based on those four things, that we want them to get to the redefinition level, then that's the best way to move forward. And my pushback to this was, if you have someone who hates technology that's, really excited about teaching kindergarten, do you think they really care about that terminology? Like, they want to get to augmentation, modification, redefinition? It's like actually really trying to push technology onto kindergarten teachers, as opposed to understanding what kindergarten teachers really are striving for. So I actually took that and said, look, this is not what I'm focused on. What I want people to focus on is the way I'm using technology actually helping this learner? Is it actually helping them grow? And if you look at it that way, who's going to disagree with that? And I'll give you an example. If you actually said, hey, a kid is struggling with reading, so instead of them having reading paper, I give them an iPad, because I can actually expand the lettering, because maybe there's some visual stuff that is causing them not to be able to read it on a book. By definition, many people would see that as substitution. Well, I could have used a book, but now I'm using an iPad. But did it make a difference to that kid? That's all that really matters. At the end of the day, does it actually help the child you're trying to serve? Whereas redefinition, the ability to create videos and all these other things, that's where a lot of people are striving for. But if you have a kid who's in your classroom, who's making TikTok videos and has 1 million followers on their account, it's not really redefinition to that kid because that kid is so comfortable with it. So it's not really changing necessarily the way that they're learning because they're already doing that outside of school. So when you use that model, it's like, hey, let's actually put tech thinking onto this teacher and just hope they embrace it, as opposed to let's understand what this teacher is really striving for and how do we actually support them. And so that's something I was really thinking about, is that you're trying, like my favorite places to speak are at leadership conferences, curriculum conferences, because it pushes me to be better because I have to really understand what the needs of that group is, but also getting them to see some value and innovation. But to get them to see value, they have to know that you value them. And so as I was writing this newsletter, I talked about 3 things that I've done in the past to really kind of tap into the people that disagree with me, that might push back on what they're doing. And this is just the 3 that I listed in this email. And you can actually see the link down below. And so the first one I listed was and this is probably how this all started, when I was hired as an assistant principal, the person who was interviewing, he was a principal at the time, he just got the job. Him and I basically started fighting in the interview process. It was surreal. And I walked out there, I'm like, this is the worst interview I've ever had in my life. It was so bad. And about 2 days later, he called and I thought I was getting the call to like basically say like, hey, you didn't get the job, et cetera. And he said, actually, I wanted to hire you. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, well, you're the only person who disagreed with me. And what I want is that I don't need someone who I hire that just thinks the way I do, because I already think that way. I want someone who pushes back. But at the end of the day, and this is something I remember him saying, at the end of the day, you tell me if you don't agree with something, but you have to back me up. Once I make a decision, you have to back me up on it, because if something goes wrong, they're not calling the assistant principal, they're calling the principal. And so I have to kind of live with the consequence. But don't let me go out to the staff when you disagree with me and not say something before. So that really kind of stuck in my mind, because when I hired my assistant principal, when I became principal, it was actually a teacher on that same staff who would challenge everything I would say. And I was like, that's who I want, because I want someone who thinks differently than me, because not only does she get to see things that I didn't see, she also, and I know this sounds weird, she appealed to people that would feel more comfortable talking to her than when they would be comfortable talking to me. I wanted to make sure that there was like a range of people that you could talk to. And so you already have you. And I think that was one of the things that I did, is to really kind of tap into the areas of who disagree with me. The second thing I actually shared in this newsletter was when we did professional learning in our communities, we were trying some new things, very maybe forward thinking. And there was not a single time we did professional learning day that we didn't actually have some of our families and parents involved in that day, because we wanted them to see what was going on and really understand it from the viewpoint of a learner. And so one of the big lies in education is that parents want school to be the exact same way it was for their kids. And I do not believe that. What I truly believe is parents want what's best for their children. But if they know no other experience than the one they had, they just default that it's the best because they've turned all right. So why wouldn't it do the same thing for kids? So the reason we would actually bring families into this professional learning is you want them to go like, this is so much better than when I was a kid. And that's what really stuck out to them. And when we invited families in, we didn't just invite parents who were like totally excited about the things that we're doing. We actually invited many parents that were like very resistant or did not want to do it or like uncomfortable with some of the things that we're doing, because we wanted them to have a deeper understanding. And when they would go through that process, then they'd kind of see this. It wasn't just something they would hear secondhand. They would actually be immersed in that experience. But they didn't always embrace what we were doing. And sometimes what I would do after, and shouldn't say sometimes, all the time, I would actually talk to the parents after. I'm like, hey, what'd you think? And sometimes they would say, hey, like, I love this, but I'm still struggling with this. And they would have really good points. And what I would do is actually say, okay, can you like give me a little bit of time? And then I would actually change some of the things that we were doing based on some of their feedback that made sense. Like it's not about like moving away from your principles, but it's being open to feedback. But once they saw that we were willing to learn from them as well and tap into their expertise, tap into their, understanding of schools, they became the biggest advocates for our school community. And that's what you want. When you speak at a teacher conference, if you've never taught, they don't listen to you, right? Teachers like to listen to teachers, administrators like to listen to administrators, and honestly, parents like to listen to parents. And so we wanted them to be the advocates, but they had to be equipped with the information that was in front of them and actually see their fingerprints on some of those solutions. So that was something that was really, really important to us. And so the third one that I listed in this email was that I actually hear this all the time, like, hey, like student leadership events, we need to like tap into student voice. But then you actually have these events, and who are we inviting to them? The kids who will really represent us well, who will, be very well behaved. They won't cause any issues. They're really good at school. And many times they'll say like, I love school because it just works great for me. And how much are you changing from that process? So what I've encouraged people to do is really tap into the students who hate school, who actually don't like school the way it is, because you're going to get really good feedback. I can't remember. I think it was like Steve Jobs, and I apologize if I'm messing up this quote, but it's like some of your best feedback comes from your most dissatisfied customers. And I'm not saying students are customers, but kind of that notion of like really tapping into the people who it didn't work for them and getting their feedback as well. And instead of listing my own example, in the email, I referenced a very good friend of mine. She's a superintendent. Her name is Deidre Raymer. And I remember working with her, and she brought in students who either dropped out of traditional schooling, for lack of a better term, and went to alternative programs to come back to speak to principals and say, here's why I didn't actually stick with your program, and here's why I didn't like it. And having the administrators listen to them and then talk about what are some of those things that they could do to ensure that it doesn't happen in the future was really, really powerful. And so you're trying to reach the people who don't agree with you, who don't like the process. That's where you're going to see the biggest change. If you really want to make change, it's not about just saying the stuff that the people who already agree with you already agree with, because you're not moving the needle at all. It's actually trying to appeal to the people who disagree with you. And at the end of this email, I shared this. It's always great to feel you're on the right track and hear from those who agree with you. But if you want things to change, you have to connect with the people who don't. Honoring their perspectives and experiences, learning from them, and finding a better way forward doesn't mean discounting what you know and believe, but it can make everything we do that much better. Always stick with your principles, but also be open to learning, because when you actually kind of find solutions that are built together, they're more likely to move us together forward. And I wanted to share this with you all. This is really, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because this is really the crux of my book, Forward Together, that's coming out in January 2026. It's titled Forward Together, Moving Schools from Conflict to Community in Contentious Times. How do we actually, kind of build visions together that move forward our communities, not just kind of like us versus them? And I think that's where we see the most significant change in our communities, is when we work together. And one of the things I used to say to the parents I used to work with is that if you and I are in the same team, we double the chance of success for your child, because that's something that is going to make things happen at an exponential rate. Anyways, I just want to share that with you all. Something I've been thinking about. You can actually see the entire newsletter. I'll link it down below. But thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for all you do. Take care.